Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a set of sources that, honestly, they really challenge our basic understanding of what it means to be human. I mean, if you thought evolution was just about, walking upright, these sources say there's a whole other stage happening right now, one that's less about physical complexity and more about consciousness.
It's a huge shift in perspective, and what we're really doing is looking at the difference between two major phases of human existence. There's the five sensory phase, which is, well, basically all of recorded history up until now, and the sources argue that's winding down. And then there's the multisensory phase, which is what's emerging.
And it's not like one is better than the other, right? The sources are pretty clear about that.
Exactly. It's not an upgrade, it's a change in function. It's a move from a stage of limitation to a stage of massive opportunity. The analogy they use is perfect. Think about a candle. A candle was incredible for its time, but when electricity came along, the candle didn't suddenly become bad, it just became inappropriate for the job. You wouldn't try to light up a city with candles today.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to sort of unpack the user manual for this new phase. What does it actually mean to be a multisensory human? We're going to get into things like authentic power, karma, and what it really means to make a choice.
A deep dive into conscious evolution, really.
Let's start with that definition of evolution we all learned in school. The one that's all about progressive organizational complexity.
Right. The single cell becomes a sponge, becomes a fish, becomes a more complex mammal.
The straight line toward a more complicated physical body.
And while that's true for the physical vehicle, it's just totally inadequate for describing the being inside the vehicle. The sources point this out so well. They say, look at two people who are equally intelligent, equally complex, the one who is compassionate, who is altruistic. We intuitively see that person as more evolved.
So it's not about being smarter. It's about being better.
Kinder. It's about where you place your value. A truly evolved being, in this new definition, values others more than the self. They value love more than the physical world. And that's the starting line for the multisensory human.
Okay, so if that's the new phase, let's talk about the old one, the five-sensory one we're leaving. It was based purely on what the five senses could perceive. So what did that mean for, survival?
Well, it meant physical survival was the only criterion for success. There was nothing else to measure. That's why survival of the fittest basically became the definition of evolution.
And if survival is your only goal, the baseline emotion for everything has to be fear.
It has to be. And that fear drives the hunt for what the sources call external power, which is just a word for control. Control over your environment, control over other people. And this competition for external power, they say it's the root of all violence.
That's a huge claim. They even go so far as to say there is, and I'm quoting here, no difference between acute schizophrenia and a world at war.
It sounds shocking, but think about the energy behind it. It's not a medical diagnosis. It's saying the energy dynamic of fear and mistrust that separates two warring nations is the exact same frequency of energy that separates two siblings who hate each other, or even the fragmented parts of a single personality. It's all the same thing.
So how does the multisensory perspective break out of that cycle?
By just seeing more, by extending your awareness beyond physical reality. A multisensory person starts to perceive these larger, invisible systems at play, and that gives you two things. More chances for growth and, maybe more importantly, more chances to avoid unnecessary trouble.
Because you can see the consequences of your actions before you even take them.
You start to see the energetic cause and effect, and that's where you can understand people like Gandhi or Christ. Their actions made zero sense in a world based on external power.
No, they looked weak from that perspective.
But they weren't using external power. They were operating from authentic power. And authentic power, the sources say, is a power that loves life in every form that it appears. It doesn't control. It aligns.
And that's the power that comes from aligning the personality with the soul. The sources have this great line that the personality and the body are just artificial aspects of the soul. They're temporary tools for this one life.
And that means all those negative emotions we feel, anger, fear, jealousy, judgment, those can only be experienced by the personality. They're temporary. But the experiences of the soul love, compassion, wisdom, those are eternal. So the goal, authentic empowerment, is getting the personality to choose to serve the energy of the soul.
And the mechanism that's always pushing us in that direction, even when we fight it, is karma.
That's the great teacher. And it's described not as a punishment, but as a completely impersonal energy dynamic. It's just about balancing energy. It's basically Newton's third law of motion for the soul. For every action, an equal and opposite reaction.
Or, as people usually say, you receive from the world what you give to the world.
Exactly that. But the part everyone misses, and the sources are so clear on this, is that karma is not a moral dynamic. Morality is a human invention. The universe doesn't judge. It just balances. You put fear into the system has to balance itself by returning fear to you. It's just mechanics.
And what's really mind-bending is how time fits into this, because the soul isn't limited to one lifetime.
Now you're getting to the core of it. Because the soul is eternal, an imbalance created in one life might not get balanced in that same life. So your personality right now, might be experiencing the effects or paying the debt from something your soul did in another incarnation.
Wow. That completely changes how you see suffering.
Yeah.
It explains why the sources say you cannot judge seeing, say, a person sleeping in a gutter.
You just can't, because you have no idea what you're looking at. You see a person, but you might actually be watching a massive karmic debt coming to completion, a profound healing. To feel superior or even to feel sorry, that's a judgment. It just creates negative energy for you.
So if that's the system, how do we start living in this new, multi-sensory way? What are the tools? The sources put a huge emphasis on reverence.
Reverence is the absolute foundation. It means you accept that all life, just by existing, has value. And this is so important. Reverence is not the same as respect.
Okay, that's a distinction we need to unpack. We use those words almost interchangeably.
But they're worlds apart. Respect is a judgment. It's selective. You respect someone for their intelligence or their success or their strength. It's conditional. Reverence is what the sources call a holy perception. It's seeing the spark of divinity in all life, equally. You can't revere a puppy but not a spider. You revere the life force itself, not the form it takes.
And when we lack that reverence, that's when we start to use other people.
That's the mechanism right there. In business, in politics, in relationships, anytime you try to get something for yourself at the expense of someone else's well-being, you've stepped away from reverence.
And the practical result of living with reverence.
Well, you automatically sidestep the really heavy karmic consequences. If you can't use another person, you can't create the big karmic debts from things like violence or killing. Reverence becomes its own form of non-judgmental justice.
Which leads right to the other big tool they talk about, responsible choice. Moving from learning through pain and crisis to learning through conscious choice.
Yes. And this is all about intention, because your intentions create your reality. The sources give a really strong warning about conflicting intentions. You might consciously say, I want to save my marriage. But if your stronger, unconscious intention is to end it, that's what will happen. And it'll tear you apart in the process.
So to make a responsible choice, you have to align those intentions. And there are 3 questions you're supposed to ask yourself first.
What are they?
They're very practical. First, what will this produce? Second, do I really want to create that? And third, the hardest one. Am I ready to accept all the consequences of this choice?
That process forces you to really think about what energy you're putting out there. Exactly. The low-frequency currents of fear or the high-frequency currents of love and wisdom. It's your choice.
Let's talk about those low-frequency currents for a minute, specifically addictions. The sources describe them as these strong wants of the personality that are fighting the soul's energy.
And they always have a specific signature. It's attraction plus fear and then a jolt of energy. But the real diagnostic tool is that an addiction can never be satisfied. Never. That's how you know it's not really about the thing you're addicted to.
So if it's not about the substance or the gambling or whatever it is, what's the real dynamic underneath it all?
The sources say that for all addictions, the root cause is a desire to prey upon a weaker soul. And that desire comes from a deep, profound feeling of powerlessness inside the personality.
So when someone feels that addictive pull, it's actually a signal that they feel powerless.
Yeah.
And they're trying to use something or someone to get a temporary feeling of being in control.
A false power surge. That's exactly it. And seeing that powerlessness is the root of it, that's the first step to healing.
You know, speaking of negative impulses, the sources have this really compassionate take on temptation. We usually think of it as this evil thing trying to trick us.
Right, but it's actually a compassionate mechanism from the universe. They call it a dry run or a dress rehearsal. It lets you experience a negative karmic impulse without actually creating it in the physical world and hurting other people.
So temptation is just a thought.
It's a thought form designed to pull negativity out of your system. If you become aware of that impulse, the urge to judge or to lash out, and you consciously challenge it in your own mind, you cleanse it. You get the lesson without creating the negative karma. It's an incredible shortcut for evolution.
It seems like that kind of awareness often comes after a crisis, though. The sources say we often need something to fail, a business, a relationship, to force us off the horizontal path and onto the vertical one.
Crisis is a very effective teacher, unfortunately. The horizontal path is just running in place. It's the endless chase for the personalities, wants more money, more status, more temporary fixes. The vertical path is the path of consciousness and growth. And that's the path where you can get help from non-physical guidance, from teachers and guides.
And how do you access that guidance?
Just by asking simple, honest questions, not, what's the meaning of life? But something like, why am I feeling so anxious about this meeting? Or why do I feel the need to judge that person? Asking those questions is like opening a door. It lets that higher frequency guidance in to help you sort things out.
So as we bring this all together, we've got a clear roadmap. Moving into this multisensory phase is really an internal job. It's about choosing reverence and clarity over fear and control. And that's a choice that's not just personal, it's challenging everything in our world.
And your personal evolution affects everything. The sources are so clear about this. The fear that separates nations is the exact same dynamic that separates you from your neighbor. So if you want less fear in the world, the only place you can start is with yourself. You can't not evolve. The only choice you have is how you learn, through pain or through wisdom.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought from this material. The final goal of this alignment is described as moving from being a soul in a body to becoming a body and a soul. So if your immortal soul is boundless, loving, and knows everything instantly, what single responsible choice can you make today to let that higher energy shape your reality? It requires letting go of what the personality wants. It means being able to truly, as the source suggests, take your hands off the steering wheel, be able to say to the universe, "Thy will be done,"